Eleanor's knees slammed against the stone floor of the tribunal hall, the impact sending shockwaves through her already trembling legs. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth where the guard had struck her, and she could taste copper on her tongue as she lifted her head to face the council of elders seated above her on their carved thrones of blackwood. 7 ancient wolves, their eyes cold as winter frost, stared down at her with expressions of disgust and condemnation. "You stand accused of the highest crime known to our kind," Elder Matthias declared, his voice echoing through the cavernous hall where hundreds of pack members had gathered to witness her judgment. "The murder of Alpha Lucas's intended mate, Vivian Ashford, through forbidden blood magic and cursed needles." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "I didn't kill anyone. I'm just a healer. I tried to save her." "Silence!" Elder Constance shrieked, slamming her gnarled staff against the marble. "We found the evidence in your cottage. 7 silver needles coated in wolfsbane and nightshade hidden beneath your floorboards. Vivian died with 7 puncture wounds along her spine, each one precisely placed to sever her connection to her wolf. Do you deny these needles belong to you?" Eleanor's breath came in short gasps. The needles. Those cursed needles that had appeared in her home 3 days ago, planted there by someone who wanted her destroyed. She had discovered them only hours before the guards broke down her door, and she had known immediately what they meant. Someone had framed her for the murder of the Alpha's betrothed, and there was no way to prove her innocence. "I am a healer," Eleanor repeated, her voice stronger now despite the fear clawing at her throat. "I use acupuncture needles to treat pain and channel energy. Those needles were not mine. Someone put them there to..." "To what? To make you look guilty?" Elder Matthias's laugh was harsh and bitter. "You are a low-born Omega, Eleanor Crane. You have no family, no status, no allies in this pack. Vivian Ashford was nobility, destined to be our Luna, beloved by all. Why would anyone frame a nobody like you for her death unless you were actually guilty?" "Because I saw something I shouldn't have seen," Eleanor thought desperately, but she couldn't speak the words aloud. 3 weeks ago, she had been gathering herbs in the forest when she witnessed Elder Constance's son, Dorian, meeting in secret with wolves from the Northern Shadow Pack, enemies who had been trying to overthrow Alpha Lucas for years. She had seen them exchange vials of poison and heard them discussing a plan to eliminate someone close to the Alpha. She had told no one, terrified of what might happen if she spoke up, but somehow they had discovered she knew. And now Vivian was dead, and Eleanor would take the blame. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall burst open with a thunderous crash. Every head turned as Alpha Lucas strode into the tribunal chamber, his massive frame radiating barely controlled fury. He stood 6.5 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the torchlight behind him, his dark hair falling across a face carved from granite and rage. His eyes, usually a warm amber, had gone completely black, his wolf so close to the surface that the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What is the meaning of this?" Lucas's voice was deadly quiet, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he had shouted. "Why was I not informed that Eleanor was being brought to tribunal?" Elder Matthias stood, his expression carefully neutral. "Alpha Lucas, we did not wish to disturb you during your mourning period. The evidence against this Omega is overwhelming. We have already reached a verdict and need only your approval to carry out the sentence." Lucas's gaze fixed on Eleanor, and she felt the full weight of his Alpha presence crash over her like a tidal wave. She had always admired him from a distance, what Omega hadn't. He was powerful, protective of his pack, and devastatingly handsome. But she had never spoken more than a few words to him in the 5 years she had lived in the Silvercrest pack. She was invisible to someone like him, a healing Omega who tended to injured wolves in her small cottage at the edge of the territory. He had been engaged to Vivian, a stunning she-wolf from one of the oldest bloodlines, and Eleanor had long ago accepted that alphas like Lucas existed in a different world from Omegas like her. But now his eyes were locked on hers, and something flickered in their depths that she couldn't identify. Recognition? Confusion? She couldn't tell. "Stand!" Lucas commanded. Eleanor struggled to her feet, her legs shaking so badly she nearly collapsed again. The chains around her wrists were made of silver, burning her skin where they touched, preventing her from accessing her wolf. She swayed, dizzy from blood loss and fear, but forced herself to meet the alpha's gaze. "Did you kill Vivienne?" Lucas asked, his voice dangerously soft. "No, Alpha. I swear on my life I didn't." "She lies!" Elder Constance's son Dorian stepped forward from the crowd, his handsome face twisted in false grief. "I saw her near Vivian's chambers the night of the murder. She was carrying something wrapped in cloth. It must have been the needles. She has always been jealous of Vivian's position, always coveted what she could never have." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Dorian was the one who had framed her. He had killed Vivian himself to prevent the Alpha from having an heir. And now he stood before the entire pack, lying with such conviction that even she almost believed him. "That's not true!" Eleanor gasped. "I was never near Vivian's chambers. I was in the healing house all night, tending to old William's fever. He can vouch for me." "Old William died 2 days ago," Dorian interrupted smoothly. "How convenient that your only alibi is now dead, just as Vivian is dead. Perhaps there is a pattern here." The crowd murmured, a low rumble of agreement and suspicion. Eleanor felt the walls closing in. She was going to die for a crime she didn't commit, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Lucas's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "What sentence have you decided?" Elder Matthias's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Death by the 7 needles of judgment. The same method she used to kill Vivian shall be used to execute her. It is only fitting." Horror crashed through Eleanor. The 7 needles of judgment was an ancient execution method, banned for centuries because of its cruelty. The condemned would have 7 silver needles driven into their spine, each one coated in a toxin designed to cause maximum agony before death. The process could take hours, and the pain was said to be beyond anything a wolf could endure. "No," Lucas said flatly. "That sentence is forbidden." "The council has voted," Elder Constance began. "I am Alpha," Lucas snarled, his wolf flashing behind his eyes. "And I forbid it. If Eleanor is to be executed, it will be by my hand, swiftly and without torture." Elder Matthias stepped down from his throne, his expression hardening. "With respect, Alpha Lucas, you are compromised by grief. Your judgment is clouded. The law is clear. Crimes of blood magic must be answered with blood justice. If you will not carry out the sentence, the council will do so in your stead." Lucas's hands clenched into fists, his claws extending. The air in the hall crackled with the force of his barely restrained power. Eleanor could see the conflict raging behind his eyes. He was Alpha, yes, but the council held ancient authority over matters of pack law. If he opposed them openly, it could fracture the pack's unity at a time when they were already vulnerable from Vivian's death. "There is another option," Elder Constance said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The ancient rites allow for a condemned prisoner to undergo the trial of truth. If she survives the 7 needles without the poison, her innocence will be proven by the moon goddess herself." Eleanor's stomach dropped. The trial of truth was even worse than an execution. The needles would still be driven into her spine, but instead of poison, they would be imbued with raw magical energy that would tear through her nervous system, forcing her body to either adapt or die. The survival rate was less than 1%, and those who did survive were often left paralyzed or insane. "She will never survive it," Lucas said, his voice rough. "It is execution by another name." "If she is innocent, the goddess will protect her," Elder Matthias countered. "And if she is guilty, then justice will be served. Surely even you cannot object to allowing the divine to decide her fate." Lucas's gaze returned to Eleanor, and this time she saw something that made her breath catch. Doubt. Not doubt about her guilt, but doubt about what to do. He was trapped between his authority and the council's power, between his desire to prevent her suffering and the political reality of his position. "Eleanor," Lucas said quietly, and the use of her name startled her. "Do you have anything to say before I make my decision?" This was her only chance. Eleanor knew that if she stayed silent, she would die, either quickly by Lucas's hand or slowly by the needles. But if she spoke the truth about what she had seen in the forest, Dorian would have her killed before she ever made it to the tribunal again. Still, what choice did she have? "Alpha," Eleanor said, her voice trembling but clear. "I saw something 3 weeks ago. In the eastern forest near the ravine. I saw—" "Enough!" Dorian cut her off, stepping forward with his hand raised. "She seeks to distract us with wild accusations. It is a common tactic of the guilty." But Lucas held up his hand, silencing Dorian with a single gesture. "Let her speak." Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I saw Dorian meeting with wolves from the Northern Shadow Pack. They were exchanging vials of poison and discussing a plot to kill someone close to you. I didn't know who they meant at the time, but now I believe they were planning to murder Vivienne. And when Dorian discovered I had witnessed their meeting, he framed me for her death to silence me." The hall erupted in chaos. Pack members shouted accusations and denials. Dorian's face went pale, then red with fury. Elder Constance shrieked that Eleanor was lying, that she would say anything to save her own life. But Lucas said nothing. He simply stared at Eleanor with an intensity that made her feel like he was looking into her very soul. "These are the desperate lies of a condemned murderer," Dorian declared, recovering his composure. "I have never met with the Northern Shadow Pack. I would never betray my Alpha. She has no proof of these wild claims." "No," Eleanor admitted. "I have no proof. I should have reported what I saw immediately, but I was afraid. I am a low-born Omega with no power and no voice. Who would have believed me?" Lucas turned to Elder Matthias. "If there is even a possibility that Eleanor speaks the truth, we cannot execute her without a thorough investigation." "There is no possibility," Elder Constance snapped. "My son is a loyal member of this pack. This Omega is trying to manipulate you, Alpha. She knows you are merciful, and she seeks to exploit that mercy." "Then let her undergo the trial of truth," Dorian said, his voice ringing with false confidence. "If she survives, we will investigate her claims. If she does not, her guilt will be proven beyond question." Lucas's jaw worked, his internal struggle visible on his face. Eleanor realized with a sinking feeling that he was going to agree. The trial of truth was the only compromise that would satisfy both the council and his own conscience. She would be subjected to unimaginable agony, and she would almost certainly die, but at least there would be a chance, however slim, that she might survive. "Very well," Lucas said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "Eleanor will undergo the trial of truth at moonrise tonight. If she survives until dawn, her innocence will be proven, and I will personally investigate her allegations against Dorian. If she does not survive—" He paused, his eyes finding hers again. "Then may the moon goddess have mercy on her soul." The guards dragged Eleanor from the tribunal hall and threw her into a cell beneath the pack house. The silver chains remained on her wrists, burning deeper now that her adrenaline was fading. She curled into a ball on the cold stone floor, shaking uncontrollably as the reality of her situation crashed over her. She was going to die tonight. There was no escaping it. The trial of truth was designed to kill, not to exonerate. Hours passed in darkness and silence. Eleanor tried to pray to the moon goddess, but the words wouldn't come. What could she possibly say? She had lived a quiet, unremarkable life. She had helped where she could, harmed no one, and asked for nothing in return. And now she would die in agony, blamed for a murder she didn't commit, while the true killer walked free. The cell door opened just as the sun began to set. Eleanor expected guards, but instead, Alpha Lucas filled the doorway. He had to duck his head to enter, and the small space seemed to shrink even further with his massive presence. He carried a water skin and a cloth, and to Eleanor's shock, he knelt beside her on the floor. "Drink," Lucas ordered, holding the water skin to her lips. Eleanor wanted to refuse. Pride demanded she refuse. But her throat was parched, and she knew she would need whatever strength she could gather for the ordeal ahead. She drank deeply, the cool water soothing her battered throat. Lucas dampened the cloth and gently wiped the dried blood from her face. His touch was surprisingly tender for such a powerful alpha, and Eleanor found herself staring at him in confusion. Why was he here? Why was he showing her kindness when he believed she was guilty of murdering his betrothed? "I don't understand," Eleanor whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Lucas's expression was unreadable. "Because regardless of what you have or have not done, you deserve dignity in your final hours." "You think I'm guilty?" "I think," Lucas paused, his hand stilling against her cheek. "I think something about this entire situation feels wrong. The evidence against you is damning, but my wolf is telling me there is more to this story than what the council has presented." Eleanor's breath caught. "Your wolf?" "He has been restless since Vivian's death. Not with grief as I expected, but with agitation, as if he senses a threat I cannot see. And when I looked at you in the tribunal hall, he did something he has never done before." Lucas's amber eyes locked onto hers. "He recognized you, not as a stranger, not as a pack member. He recognized you as something more." The air between them seemed to thicken. Eleanor could feel her own wolf stirring beneath her skin, pressing against the silver-induced suppression, desperate to reach out to the alpha before her. It made no sense. She had never spoken to Lucas, never been close enough to catch his scent, never done anything to draw his attention. And yet, her wolf was screaming at her that this alpha was important, that he was... No. Eleanor shook her head, rejecting the impossible thought before it could fully form. Alphas like Lucas didn't have omegas like her as mates. It was a cruel trick her mind was playing, a desperate fantasy conjured by fear and approaching death. "I am telling you the truth," Eleanor said, her voice gaining strength. "I saw Dorian with the Northern Shadow Wolves. I heard them planning murder, and I believe he killed Vivian herself when she discovered what he was plotting. He framed me because I am powerless and expendable. No one will miss a low-born Omega with no family." Lucas's hand moved to the silver chains on her wrists. For a moment, Eleanor thought he might remove them, but he simply traced the burns they had left on her skin with a feather-light touch. "If you survive the trial, I will tear this pack apart to find the truth. I swear it on my life as Alpha. And if I don't survive, then I will have failed you." Lucas's voice was rough with emotion. "And I will spend the rest of my life wondering if I condemned an innocent woman to death." Before Eleanor could respond, the cell door opened again and the guards appeared. "It is time, Alpha." Lucas stood, his expression hardening back into the mask of an alpha performing his duty. But as the guards hauled Eleanor to her feet, he caught her arm for just a moment. "Fight," he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. "Whatever happens out there, fight with everything you have. Do not let them take you easily." The ritual grounds were located in a clearing deep in the Pax territory, surrounded by ancient oak trees that had witnessed countless trials over the centuries. A stone altar stood in the center, carved with symbols of the moon goddess and stained with the blood of those who had died seeking divine judgment. Torches ringed the clearing, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the hundreds of pack members who had gathered to witness Eleanor's trial. The 7 elders stood in a semicircle behind the altar, their ceremonial robes billowing in the evening breeze. On the altar itself lay 7 long silver needles, each one inscribed with runes that seemed to writhe and pulse in the firelight. Eleanor could feel the magical energy radiating from them, ancient and hungry and utterly merciless. The guards forced Eleanor to her knees before the altar. Elder Matthias began to chant in the old language, words of judgment and purification that had been spoken at trials for thousands of years. The crowd joined in, their voices rising and falling in a haunting melody that made Eleanor's skin prickle with dread. "Eleanor Crane," Elder Matthias intoned, "you have been accused of the murder of Vivian Ashford through forbidden blood magic. You have claimed innocence and invoked the trial of truth. By the ancient laws, you will now submit to the 7 needles of judgment. If you are innocent, the moon goddess will grant you her protection, and you will survive until dawn. If you are guilty, the needles will exact justice for your crimes. Do you accept the terms of this trial?" Eleanor's mouth was dry, but she managed to speak. "I accept." "Then let the trial begin." The guards ripped away the back of Eleanor's shirt, exposing her spine to the cold night air. They forced her forward until her chest pressed against the altar, her arms stretched out to either side and bound with silver chains. Eleanor could see Lucas standing at the edge of the clearing, his face a mask of controlled fury. Their eyes met for one brief moment, and she saw something flash in his gaze that looked almost like anguish. Elder Constance lifted the first needle. "The first needle of judgment, for the crime of taking an innocent life." The needle pierced Eleanor's skin at the base of her skull, and agony exploded through her body. It felt like liquid fire was being poured directly into her spine, burning through every nerve ending simultaneously. Eleanor screamed, the sound raw and animal, echoing through the clearing. The magical energy from the needle didn't just cause physical pain. It reached into her mind, tearing through her memories, searching for evidence of guilt. Eleanor saw flashes of her life played out in excruciating detail. Her parents dying when she was young, leaving her orphaned and alone. The years she spent as a servant in the pack house, invisible and unimportant. The day she discovered she had a gift for healing and began studying the old ways of using needles to channel energy and treat pain. Every moment was examined, dissected, judged by the merciless magical force invading her consciousness. The second needle of judgment, for the crime of practicing forbidden magic. The second needle drove into her spine 2 inches below the first. Eleanor's back arched, her muscles seizing so violently she thought her bones might snap. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined possible, beyond anything a wolf should be able to endure without losing their sanity. But through the agony, she felt something else, something the elders hadn't anticipated. The needle's magic was supposed to destroy her, to tear her apart from the inside out. But Eleanor was a healer, someone who had spent years learning to channel and manipulate energy through the precise placement of needles. Her body recognized the intrusion not as an attack, but as a challenge. Without conscious thought, her wolf began to fight back, not by rejecting the needle's power, but by trying to control it. The third needle of judgment, for the crime of betraying your alpha's trust. The third needle pierced her spine in the center of her back. Eleanor's scream died in her throat, replaced by a gasp of shock as she felt the needle's energy merge with something deep inside her. Her wolf, suppressed for so long by the silver chains, surged forward with a strength that shocked them both. The needle's power, instead of killing her, began to flow through her like a current of electricity, connecting with the first 2 needles already embedded in her flesh. In the crowd, Lucas took a step forward, his wolf rising in response to something he could sense but not understand. Eleanor's scent was changing, evolving from the simple fragrance of an omega into something far more complex and powerful. It called to him on a primal level that transcended pack bonds or social hierarchies. The fourth needle of judgment, for the crime of jealousy and covetousness. Elder Constance drove the fourth needle into Eleanor's spine with particular viciousness, aiming for a spot that would cause maximum suffering. But something went wrong. As the needle pierced Eleanor's skin, a pulse of golden light erupted from the point of entry, traveling up and down her spine like lightning. Eleanor's eyes flew open, and for the first time since the trial began, she wasn't screaming. She was glowing. The crowd gasped. The elders stepped back in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. The needles were meant to kill, not to empower. But Eleanor could feel what was occurring inside her body with crystal clarity. The needles weren't destroying her. They were awakening something that had been dormant her entire life. Each one acted as a conduit, channeling magical energy through precise points along her spine, points she had studied for years in her healing practice. The trial was accidentally creating the perfect conditions for a transformation no one had anticipated. "Continue!" Elder Matthias barked, his voice edged with panic. "The fifth needle of judgment, for the crime of deception and lies." The fifth needle drove home, and Eleanor's body convulsed. But this time, it wasn't from pain. It was from power. The golden light spreading through her veins intensified, and she felt her wolf break free of the silver suppression. The chains on her wrists began to smoke, the metal unable to withstand the surge of energy flowing through her. Lucas was running now, pushing through the crowd toward the altar. His wolf was howling inside his mind, a sound of recognition and desperate need. He didn't understand what was happening, but every instinct he possessed was screaming that he needed to reach Eleanor, needed to protect her, needed to... The sixth needle of judgment, for the crime of causing suffering to your pack. The sixth needle joined the others, and Eleanor's chains shattered. She pushed herself up from the altar, turning to face the elders even as they prepared the seventh and final needle. Her eyes had gone from their normal green to a brilliant gold that seemed to contain the light of the full moon itself. Her wolf was fully present now, merged with her human consciousness in a way that should have been impossible for someone who had never completed their first shift. "Stop this!" Lucas roared, finally reaching the altar. He placed himself between Eleanor and the elders, his alpha presence flooding the clearing with such force that several pack members fell to their knees. "Can't you see what's happening? She's not guilty. The goddess is protecting her." But Elder Matthias was beyond reason. "The trial must be completed, the seventh needle of judgment, for the crime of murder." The elder lunged forward with the final needle, aiming for the base of Eleanor's spine where it would complete the circuit and either kill her instantly or prove her innocence beyond all doubt. But he never reached her. Lucas's hand shot out, catching the elder's wrist in a grip that made bones crack. "No," Lucas growled, his wolf fully visible behind his eyes. "The trial ends now." "You cannot interfere!" Elder Constance shrieked. "The law!" "I am the law," Lucas snarled, "and I say this trial is over." But Eleanor reached out, her hand closing over the seventh needle in Elder Matthias's grip. "No, Alpha. Let him finish it. I want there to be no doubt." Lucas's head whipped around, his eyes wide with shock and something that looked like fear. "Eleanor, you don't know what that final needle will do." "I know exactly what it will do," Eleanor said, and her voice carried a resonance it had never possessed before, as if multiple voices spoke through her at once. "The 7 needles are meant to kill the guilty, but in an innocent person, they create something else, something the old laws knew about but the elders have forgotten. The 7th needle doesn't judge, it transforms." Before anyone could stop her, Eleanor took the needle from the elder's hand and drove it into her own spine at the precise point where it would complete the pattern. For a moment, nothing happened. The clearing fell silent, every eye locked on the Omega girl standing before the altar, her back pierced by 7 silver needles that glowed with golden light. Then Eleanor tilted her head back and screamed, but this time it wasn't a sound of agony. It was a sound of transcendence. The 7 needles erupted with light so bright that everyone in the clearing had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the needles were gone. Not fallen from her skin, not lying on the ground, simply gone, as if they had been absorbed into her body. Eleanor turned to face the crowd, and everyone fell silent in shock. Her appearance had changed subtly but unmistakably. Her hair, once a plain brown, now held streaks of silver that caught the moonlight. Her eyes remained gold, glowing with an inner radiance that spoke of power and ancient magic. But most striking of all were the 7 marks on her back, visible through her torn shirt. 7 silver lines that traced her spine, each one marking the point where a needle had entered. They looked like runes or tattoos or scars from lightning strikes. They pulsed faintly with golden light. "The 7 needles of judgment have spoken," Eleanor said, her voice still carrying that strange resonance. "I am innocent of all charges. The goddess herself has borne witness to my truth." Elder Matthias staggered backward, his face ashen. The other elders looked equally shocked, except for Elder Constance and Dorian, whose expressions had shifted from surprise to barely concealed fury. Lucas stepped forward, his gaze roaming over Eleanor as if seeing her for the first time. "What are you?" he asked, and there was no accusation in his voice, only wonder. "I don't know," Eleanor admitted, the supernatural resonance fading from her voice, leaving her sounding vulnerable and uncertain once more. "I can feel the needles still inside me. They're part of me now, and I can sense—" She frowned, her golden eyes sweeping across the gathered pack members. "I can sense lies. The needles have given me the ability to perceive truth and deception." Her gaze locked onto Dorian, and her expression hardened. "He is guilty. I can feel the deception rolling off him in waves. He killed Vivian, he framed me, and he has been working with the Northern Shadow Pact to undermine your rule, Alpha Lucas." Dorian laughed, but it sounded forced and brittle. "This is absurd. She has clearly been touched by dark magic. Nothing she says can be trusted." "Bring him to me," Eleanor commanded, and to everyone's shock, 3 pack members immediately seized Dorian's arms. The compulsion in her voice was undeniable, a power that even she didn't fully understand yet. Lucas helped Eleanor step down from the altar, his hand steady on her back despite the strange silver marks that now adorned her spine. She swayed slightly, exhaustion and the after effects of the transformation making her legs weak, but she forced herself to remain upright as Dorian was dragged before her. "I can do more than sense lies," Eleanor said, her hand rising to hover over Dorian's chest. "The needles have shown me how to read the truth written in a person's very essence. But I need permission, Alpha. I need you to allow me to expose what he has done." Lucas's jaw clenched. "Do it." Eleanor pressed her palm against Dorian's chest, and golden light flared from her hand. Dorian screamed, thrashing against the wolves holding him, but they didn't release their grip. The light spread through his body, and suddenly, everyone in the clearing could see what Eleanor was seeing, images projected into the air like a shared vision. They saw Dorian meeting with wolves from the Northern Shadow Pack, saw him accepting vials of poison and discussing how to destabilize the Silvercrest Pack from within. They saw him learning that Vivian was pregnant with Lucas's child, a child that would have secured the Alpha's bloodline and strengthened his rule. They saw Dorian creeping into Vivian's chambers in the dead of night, saw him drive 7 poisoned needles into her spine with practiced precision. They saw him plant the needles in Eleanor's cottage and spread rumors about her jealousy and her dangerous obsession with forbidden magic. When the visions ended, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Elder Constance let out a wail of denial, but even she couldn't argue with what they had all witnessed. The evidence was irrefutable, burned into the minds of every pack member present. Lucas's roar of rage shook the very trees. His shift was instantaneous and brutal, bones cracking and reforming as his wolf took control. He was the largest wolf Eleanor had ever seen, his midnight black fur seeming to absorb the torchlight, his eyes blazing with murderous intent. Dorian barely had time to scream before Lucas was on him, teeth closing around his throat. The execution was swift and merciless. Lucas's jaws crushed Dorian's windpipe, and the traitor fell lifeless to the ground. But the Alpha wasn't finished. He turned on Elder Constance, who had fallen to her knees begging for mercy. Eleanor felt no sympathy for the elder who had been so eager to see her tortured and killed, but she also knew that Lucas's rage, while justified, needed to be controlled before he did something that would haunt him later. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the massive wolf's head. "Enough, Alpha," she said. "He is dead. The threat is ended. Don't let him turn you into something you're not." Lucas's wolf snarled, but gradually, the red haze of rage began to fade from his eyes. He shifted back to human form, standing naked and covered in Dorian's blood, his chest heaving with the effort of controlling his fury. "You knew," Lucas said, turning to Elder Constance. "You knew what your son had done, and you tried to have an innocent woman executed to protect him." "He was my child," Constance whispered, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I couldn't let him die. I couldn't." "You will be exiled from this pack," Lucas declared, his voice cold as death. "You have 1 hour to gather your belongings and leave Silvercrest territory. If you are ever seen here again, you will be killed on sight. The same applies to any wolf who aided Dorian in his betrayal. Come forward now and confess, or be hunted down when the truth is inevitably revealed." 3 more pack members stepped forward, their heads bowed in shame. Lucas stripped them of their pack bonds with a brutality that made several observers flinch, severing the connections that had tied them to the Silvercrest pack for their entire lives. They would be rogues now, outcasts, vulnerable to any pack that chose to claim or kill them. As the condemned wolves were led away, Lucas turned back to Eleanor. She stood alone near the altar, still glowing faintly with golden light, looking both powerful and utterly exhausted. The pack members were staring at her with a mixture of awe and fear, unsure how to process what they had witnessed. Lucas approached slowly, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved too quickly. "Eleanor," he said, "I owe you an apology that no words can adequately express. I allowed you to be put through unimaginable suffering. I should have investigated more thoroughly. I should have trusted my instincts. You did what you thought was right," Eleanor interrupted, swaying slightly on her feet. "You gave me a chance to prove my innocence when you could have simply executed me. I don't blame you, Alpha." "Lucas," he corrected, catching her arm as her legs finally gave out. "Just Lucas. And I do blame myself." He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Eleanor knew she should protest, should insist she could walk, but she was so tired, and his warmth felt so good against her battered body. She let her head rest against his shoulder, breathing in his scent of pine and snow and something uniquely him. "The needles are still part of me," Eleanor murmured, her eyes drifting closed. "I can feel them in my spine, connected to my nervous system. They've changed me, Lucas. I don't know what I am anymore." "You are extraordinary," Lucas said. "You are the woman who survived the impossible. You are the wolf who exposed a traitor and saved this pack from being destroyed from within. You are—" He paused, his arms tightening around her. "You are my mate." Eleanor's eyes flew open. "What?" Lucas's expression was raw with emotion he wasn't bothering to hide anymore. "My wolf has been trying to tell me since the moment I walked into that tribunal. But I was too grief-stricken, too angry, too blind to understand what he was saying. You are my true mate, Eleanor. Not Vivienne. You." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks, and she didn't know if they were from relief or joy or the overwhelming absurdity of everything that had happened. "That's not possible. I'm just an Omega. I'm nobody. You deserve someone like Vivienne, someone strong and beautiful and worthy of being Luna." "You just survived the trial of truth," Lucas said, his voice gentle but firm. You absorbed 7 cursed needles into your body and turned them into a source of power. You exposed a conspiracy that would have destroyed my pack. You are the strongest, most beautiful, most worthy woman I have ever known, and if you'll have me, I would be honored to call you my mate and my Luna. Eleanor stared up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or obligation, but all she saw was truth. Raw, vulnerable, absolute truth. The needles inside her confirmed it, singing in her spine with recognition of the mate bond that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. "I'll have you," Eleanor whispered. "Moon, help me. I'll have you." Lucas's answering smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. He carried her away from the ritual grounds, away from the staring pack members, to his private chambers in the pack house. He laid her gently on his bed and fetched warm water and soft cloths to clean the blood and dirt from her skin. His touch was reverent, worshipful, as if she were made of spun glass and might shatter at any moment. "The marks on your back," Lucas said softly, tracing one of the 7 silver lines with his fingertip. "Do they hurt?" "No," Eleanor said, shivering at his touch, but not from pain. "They feel like they're supposed to be there. Like I was always meant to have them." Lucas leaned down and pressed a kiss to each of the 7 marks, and Eleanor felt warmth bloom through her body with each touch of his lips. The needles responded to his presence, pulsing with gentle golden light, as if they recognized and welcomed their mate. "I failed you once," Lucas murmured against her skin. "I will never fail you again. I swear on my life, on my wolf, on the moon goddess herself. I will protect you, honor you, and love you for as long as I draw breath." Eleanor turned in his arms, cupping his face in her hands. "And I swear to you that I will stand beside you, support you, and love you with everything I am, including these 7 needles of judgment that have become needles of power." Their kiss was soft at first, tentative and sweet, but it quickly deepened into something more primal. The mate bond snapped into place between them with an almost audible click, flooding Eleanor's senses with Lucas's emotions, his love, his desire, his absolute certainty that she was his and he was hers. She could feel his wolf calling to hers, and for the first time in her life, she felt her own wolf respond with equal strength and certainty. They made love slowly, carefully, Lucas treating Eleanor as if she were precious and fragile, despite the power now coursing through her veins. He worshipped every inch of her body, murmuring endearments and promises against her skin. When they finally joined together, the 7 marks on Eleanor's back blazed with golden light, and the mate bond solidified into something unbreakable and eternal. In the days that followed, news of Eleanor's transformation and her exposure of Dorian's betrayal spread throughout the surrounding packs. The Silvercrest pack had suffered a blow with the loss of Elder Constance and several other members, but they had gained something far more valuable: a Luna who could perceive truth and lies, whose very existence had been blessed by the moon goddess herself. Lucas formally claimed Eleanor as his mate before the entire pack in a ceremony that attracted wolves from hundreds of miles away. She stood before them wearing a gown of silver and gold, the 7 marks on her back visible through the sheer fabric, glowing softly in the moonlight. When Lucas placed his mark on her neck, sealing their bond for all to see, the crowd erupted in cheers that echoed through the forest. Eleanor learned to control her new abilities over the following weeks. The 7 needles had given her more than just the power to sense deception. They had awakened a gift for healing that went far beyond anything she had possessed before. She could channel energy through the needles in her spine, using them to diagnose illness, mend injuries, and even ease the pain of those who were dying. Pack members who had once ignored her now sought her out, begging for her help with ailments that had plagued them for years. But Eleanor's greatest power was the one she used most sparingly: the ability to force the truth from those who refused to speak it. When a rogue pack attacked their borders, Eleanor was able to capture one of their warriors and extract information about their plans by simply touching him and channeling the needle's power. The sensation was deeply unpleasant for the subject, but it was far more merciful than torture, and it gave Lucas the intelligence he needed to defend his territory effectively. 6 months after the trial of truth, Eleanor stood in the packhouse nursery, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Lucas's child grew inside her, strong and healthy, a symbol of the new future they were building together. The baby kicked, and Eleanor laughed, marveling at the miracle of it all. She had gone from a nobody Omega facing execution to the Luna of the Silvercrest Pack, carrying the next generation of the Alpha bloodline. Lucas entered the nursery and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his large hands covering hers on her belly. "How are you feeling?" he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Grateful," Eleanor said simply. "Grateful that I survived. Grateful that the truth was revealed. Grateful that I found you." "I'm the one who should be grateful," Lucas countered. "You saved this pack, Eleanor. You saved me. Those 7 needles that were meant to kill you instead gave you the power to change everything." Eleanor turned in his arms, the 7 silver marks on her back glowing softly as they always did when she was close to Lucas. "They cursed me with 7 needles meant to destroy me," she said. "But the moon goddess turned that curse into a blessing. She fused them into my spine and gave me the power to control fate itself, or at least to see it clearly and help guide others toward their true destinies." "And what does fate have in store for us?" Lucas asked, his amber eyes warm with love. Eleanor smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "A life together, a family, a pack that will be stronger than ever before, and the absolute certainty that no matter what challenges come our way, we will face them together." Lucas kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. And in that moment, with her mate's arms around her and their child growing inside her, Eleanor understood that sometimes the cruelest trials led to the greatest transformations. The 7 needles that had pierced her spine had indeed changed her fate, but not by ending her life. They had changed it by awakening her power, revealing her true mate, and giving her the strength to claim the destinies she had never dared to dream was possible. She was Eleanor, Luna of the Silvercrest Pack, blessed by the moon goddess and marked by the 7 needles of judgment. And this was only the beginning of her story. Did you like the story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Shout out from our friends in Texas, England, New York, Canada, and more. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!